Part 48. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Jeon. Chapter 471. One sentence. Like a huge stone thrown into a calm lake, it stirred up thousands of waves. But immediately after, all the sounds disappeared in an instant. Fallen into dead silence. But Lin Xian disappeared from everyone's visual space. In other words, the body in place is actually an afterimage. Why does afterimage appear? When the human eye's vision lasts for 0.1 seconds. The speed of movement that can completely leave the original position within 0.1 seconds. It can produce a brief afterimage within human sight. But the question is, can humans move faster than 0.1 seconds? Basically no one can do it. In other words, normal people can't do it. But Lin Xian did it. Disappear from their visual space. Boom. His feet were on the ceiling. Looking down at the soldiers below from the air like standing upside down. When the roar sounded, all the soldiers looked up and saw Lin Xian standing on the ceiling. The afterimage appears again. Lin Xian disappeared from their visual space again. No one can see clearly. No one knew how fast he was at this time. Almost instantly, as if teleporting, Lin Xian's body smashed into the middle of the soldiers. The first second, punch. What is the Guinness World Record for the fastest punch? Double fist, 13 times. But Lin Xian punched 17 times in 1 second. This speed is already faster than the rate of fire of ordinary firearms. As he waved his fists, heads were dented, broken, or even exploded. All the sounds seemed to sound at the same time and converge together. The moment Lin Xian closed his fist, the corpses of 17 soldiers flew out in all directions in the corridor like a goddess scattering flowers. Flying into the air, hitting the wall and colliding with other soldiers. The second, slash. Between body movements. Lin Xian's arm seemed to have turned into a pair of swords, slashing at the unprepared throat of a famous soldier. Just hear a click. When this sound appears, Lin Xian's two-handed sword had already chopped the necks of 16 soldiers. The third second, shooting. A pair of dark and huge pistols appeared in Lin Xian's hands. Boom. 1 second, 14 shots. The two pistol magazines were emptied instantly. 14 soldiers' heads exploded instantly. This is also the first time Lin Xian has used his full strength since he grew up. 14 shots per second with two guns is not the most terrifying thing. The scary thing is that those bullets blasted the soldiers' heads one after another and did not stop. Among them, 5 terrible bullets shattered the second head, resulting in a secondary kill. The fourth second, charge. Lin Xian's body passed by the last dozen soldiers. Bloody light burst onto their necks in an instant. I don't know when. The two guns in Lin Xian's hands had long since disappeared and turned into two sabers. More than a dozen heads flew into the air. While tumbling in the air, the faces and eyes of these soldiers were also confused and stunned. It was as if he hadn't noticed what was happening. But Lin Xian was already standing in front of the fourth prince. The fifth second. Stop. The old king's angry words suddenly sounded. The fourth prince was stunned and looked at Lin Xian in front of him. It was like looking at a demon god. However, he found that he could not move. Except for the ability to blink his eyes and open his mouth, he seemed to have lost all feeling below his neck. Why is this happening? With doubts, the fourth prince's mind fell into darkness. A head fell from his neck and hit the ground. The pungent smell of blood filled the air. It makes one feel an overwhelming sense of nausea. The entire corridor was like a hell of flesh and blood, filled with cold corpses lying everywhere. The blood had already dyed the corridor floor red, as if forming a blood-colored ocean. No pain, no whining, and no fear. Because there is no one left alive. including the fourth prince and hundreds of soldiers. All dead. Who are you? How dare you use me as a tool and give me orders? Lin Xian's tone was so calm. Are you worthy? Do you deserve it? 3 simple words, but he was facing the king of a country. Not only contemptuous, but also mocking. Why did Lin Xian go berserk? Because he is not only representing himself at this time. This time the old man and I came to the rich country, and they represented the country. Defu, a small country. Who gave you the courage to set a trap for the Dragon Kingdom and borrow its power? He even wanted to hold Longuo's sword and borrow it to kill people. Do you deserve it? Lin Xian had already guessed it. Among the soldiers he killed in front of him, some must have been controlled by certain people. The old king wanted to use the power of the Dragon Kingdom to clear out these rebellious soldiers and leave behind soldiers loyal to the royal family. He even did not hesitate to use his son to stage this drama. This is why when Lin Xian saw the fourth prince, he did not notice any sadness or other emotions in his eyes. No matter what kind of animal he is still your biological father. If you really died, would you be sad at all? It shows that the fourth prince knows that his father is not dead. That's why Lin Xian deliberately said those words to test. As a result, the fourth prince was confused. I found that Lin Xian did not follow the script and was at a loss. However, the plan of the old king and the fourth prince was successful. Those soldiers could not help but take action. But the rebellious soldiers were also killed by Lin Xian in an instant. But the situation changed. According to the normal script, those traitors should stop after they died. But the old king did not give an order. Did he want to pile him to death? Is there a possibility? Was the old king also frightened by Lin Xian's terrifying power? Wanted to take the opportunity to kill Lin Xian? That's why Lin Xian said he wanted to massacre the royal family. Of course. This was still Lin Xian's test. Wanted to see if his reasoning was right. Wanted to see if all this was the old king's plot. At the same time, he was also asking the old king, what if you can't pile me to death? Are you afraid that I will kill your whole family? Does the old king dare to gamble? He didn't dare. He was also frightened by Lin Xian's words, knowing that the people of Longuo had discovered his plot. Then, he spoke. But his words also proved all of Lin Xian's guesses. The other party not only used him as a tool, but also wanted to kill him. So, the remaining soldiers were all dead, and the fourth prince was also dead. What is losing both the wife and the soldiers? This is it. Lin Xian not only slaughtered all the royal soldiers of the rich country, but also killed his son. Do you think this is over? I need an explanation now, if you can't give it. Lin Xian's tone was still so flat. I will give your royal family an explanation. What is it like to challenge a country? Lin Xian, actually, I am also a coward, but I can't lose face. Come on, let's hurt each other. Let's see whether you will destroy me or I will destroy you. I didn't plan to go back alive when I came to this world. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 472. Many people who know Lin Xian know this. This guy looks very smart, but is actually very reckless most of the time. Just act reckless and act like a psycho. Even if the King of Heaven comes, I will beat your brains out. Don't stay overnight if you have a grudge, report it on the spot. Faced with a personality like his, the people above him were also afraid. What's the saying? We are not afraid of the gangsters being educated, but we are afraid that the gangsters are kings. Who wouldn't shudder to see Lin Xian's force? So, wherever he is, there must be a tie. Taiko is the best place to belong. More than 800 soldiers guarded his side. What does it mean that there is no forced number? So, aren't you afraid that if he runs away, the sky is high and the birds can fly? Not afraid. The Muse sisters and his relatives had already locked him up. So now a strange situation arises. The security force around the Muse sisters has been upgraded again and again. Lin Xian doesn't know yet. This time he went abroad, and the two sisters were with him except Lao Wu. The other guards have all been replaced by combat soldiers. It has reached the point where I am afraid of dropping it when I hold it in my hand, and I am afraid of melting when I hold it in my mouth. Think back to those days. Lin Xian killed a second-generation man and still had to seek protection from his sister. Look now. They became the Muse sisters and ran rampant under his wings. The old man who came back to his senses looked at the little guy in front of him with emotion. After changing clothes and taking a shower, Lin Xian leisurely drank tea and ate cakes. The sunshine returned to Jun's face, and his eyes shone with a lively and calm light. No matter how you look at it, he looks like a young man who has just stepped out of school. Who would have thought? 20 minutes ago he was shouting like a thug, pointing at the nose of the king of a country and yelling at him, asking him to give him an explanation. Killed other people's princes, massacred other people's soldiers, and asked them to answer for it. Are there any such bandits? Have. As long as Dragon Kingdom's cannons have enough firepower and a long enough range. Don't say Lin Xian bullies others. Can any cat or dog borrow a sword from the Dragon Kingdom? Since you dare to reach out, don't blame Lin Xian for chopping off your hand. Is this true? It's too much, the old man sighed. The old king had many sons, so it would be nothing if 2 of them died. But that is someone else's child after all. Everyone is afraid of death when they get old. The richer and more powerful they are, the more they fear death. Lin Xian looked at the old man in front of him and smiled. Of course, I'm not referring to you, don't get me wrong. What the hell, the old man laughed angrily and almost wanted to curse. Of course I knew that Lin Xian was not talking about him. But what are you explaining? Are you trying to misunderstand me on purpose? Don't worry, the old guy is feeling guilty now. He's scared. Lin Xian took a sip of tea and said, that's how people are. The more guilty they are, the more they will compromise. The old man nodded. Have you ever thought about why the higher-ups asked you to come here? I've thought about it. Lin Xian almost blushed. Should I help Deifu deal with the people from Sam country? As a result, he first dealt with the people from the rich country. I am indeed a talent. Come on, take me to Carbides, Lin Xian complained in his heart. The old man smiled and shook his head, but I don't blame you either. If you want to blame the old king for having other thoughts. He actually wanted to pile up the swords of Dragon Kingdom. Why would a country leader have such thoughts? For example, a talented person comes to your home. This talent is priceless. But you can't get him because he belongs to someone else. If you had the ability, would you want to destroy him? This is people. Greedy, selfish, destroying what you can't get. It's the same for everyone. It's just that many people can control greed and selfishness. But some people can't help it. There are also some people who don't need to be controlled. For example, the leader of a country. What he wants to destroy. Isn't this a normal thing? But at that moment he forgot. The thing he wants to destroy belongs to a superpower. You are the head of a country. But you, the king, are just a fart in Lin Xian's eyes. But now, there is only one thing before the old king. Calm down the anger of Longuo and Lin Xian. If it can't be calmed down, then don't blame Lin Xian for not practicing martial ethics. If I say we want to kill your royal family, we must kill them. In the morning, the first ray of sunshine falls gently. Deifu's palace seemed to be awakened by the morning sun. The old king walked up to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dragon Kingdom. The 2 old men held hands again, with smiles on their faces. It's like nothing happened yesterday. But just an hour ago. De Fu calls Longuo. Resign a contract. An oil for weapons contract worth $100 billion. That's what the contract basically means. I will give you 100 billion oil. As for what weapons you give me, Longuo will decide on his own. According to the Longuo dialect, lose money and eliminate disasters. After hearing the news, Lin Xian's face was obviously happy. I shouted in my heart, the boss is generous, the boss has a good waist and good kidneys. Just let them go. If not, will he get any benefits from destroying the wealthy royal family? If the rich royal family is destroyed, who do you think will benefit? Presumably the happiest person at that time was Sam Country. They will also immediately establish a new puppet royal family. Lin Xian is not really a fool. Even if you pretend, you will get the benefits. This is the royal way. Hello. The old king stood in front of Lin Xian, smiling and extending his hand. Hello. Lin Xian forced out a slightly sunny smile and held the old king's hand. Not very good. The old king put away his smile and said expressionlessly, I lost a son. Isn't this too direct? You will make everyone very embarrassed. Lin Xian also stopped laughing. How many more people do you want to die? I give you face, you have to take it. Don't show shame. The old king's face suddenly froze. He's still young and can't speak. The old man broke the ice with a smile. The three of them sat down and the atmosphere relaxed. At their level, there is no such thing as grudges or grudges. There are only interests between people and between countries. Within 10 years, oil countries must get rid of Sam state. The old king said in a deep voice, but my strength is not enough. The old man did not speak, but listened quietly and smiled. Lin Xian's eyes immediately turned into gossip. This was his first time communicating between levels. As a newbie, Lin Xian just wants to study now and doesn't want to talk. Right now, there is a problem with the people around me. The old king sighed and looked at Lin Xian. I want to trouble you, help me find it. This is the right thing. When asking someone for help, say please first. Lin Xian nodded slightly, okay. 100 billion is not that easy to get. The bosses have issued an order. Find out the traitor to the wealthy royal family. This is the rhythm of catching the traitor immediately. Lin Xian was thinking. Is this the real purpose behind why the bosses asked him to come to Daifukuo? Alas, they made no secret of their intention to treat me as a tool. Longuo, do you want to marry 2 wives at once? Lin Xian, I think so. Longuo, be good and be obedient. Lin Xian, I'm very good. Now he just wants to face this humming life with a bullshit attitude. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun. Chapter 473. Information on 14 princes, including illegitimate children. Put it in front of Lin Xian. He was dumbfounded, and the envious people were numb. Let me go, this is really a football team. The old king was able to send this information because he was telling Lin Xian. These people are all suspects and may become the new king after his death. They may also be involved with people from Sam country. But now, something terrible happened. The royal family's security force became somewhat weak. The top guards were all killed by Lin Xian. A possibility will arise if the security force is severely weakened. Many people want the old king to die. These people include Sam and his children. Because as long as he dies, many people will benefit. Of course, these are what the old king said to Lin Xian. Does Lin Xian believe it? Don't make trouble, he prefers to believe that men can have children. The reason why I don't believe it? Because the old king wanted to kill him with soldiers last night. If there is no backhand, there is no trump card. Is he willing to do so? Lin Xian also had a wild idea. The old king wanted to use his help to kill all the soldiers and guards. The only thing he didn't expect was that Lin Xian would kill his son as well. There is basis for thinking so. Just like an ancient emperor, if there was a traitor in a certain department around him, what will be done? Kill them all. Because you don't know if there are any traitors among the remaining people. The best way is to exterminate the family, and never cause any further trouble. Then Lin Xian had a bolder idea. Is it possible that the old king had already calculated that the fourth prince would die? Or did he deliberately deliver the fourth prince to Lin Xian and let him kill him? Why do you think so? There is an old saying, the most ruthless emperor's family. First of all, it is the fourth prince who manages Deifu's money bag. Secondly, maybe he did have evil intentions against the old king. The old king is using the help of the Dragon Kingdom to get rid of his son and take back the money bag? If this is the case, he can't kill himself? Cannot. From ancient times to the present, the royal family has been most taboo about killing relatives. You taste. If the old king killed his son with his own hands, what would others think of him? You can even kill your own child without mercy, but wouldn't it be even more cruel to kill others? Then who would dare to follow such a king and play with him in the future? The head fell off as soon as it fell off. But the people of the Dragon Kingdom took action and the problem was solved. He died of a son who had ulterior motives, eliminated the hidden dangers of the royal soldiers, and got back the money bag. This allowed Longuo to get help for the sake of his dead son, and at the same time, he donated 100 billion. Are you, Longuo, too embarrassed not to take action or help him? Kill several birds with one stone. What a scary old cunt, Lin Xian was horrified. Think about it if it was really what he suspected. Isn't this calculation terrible? When Lin Xian told the old man his reasoning, the old man's face suddenly became solemn, and his spine felt chilly. Is it possible? The answer he gave was, 90%. There is no point saying this now. Lin Xian must take action to find the traitor in the wealthy royal family. This is no longer a matter of calculation. This is a matter of national interests. At the same time, Lin Xian discovered that the old king was probably fishing. At this time, the palace's defense was weak and the soldiers and guards were dead. It was a good time to assassinate the old king. You said that such an opportunity would be encountered by someone with evil intentions. Will you let it go? Not only the traitor will not let him go, but the people of Sam country will not let him go either. So what follows should be a brutal assassination. Some people will do anything. Because after passing this village, there is no next store. 9 a.m. The old man held talks with the old king on behalf of the Dragon Kingdom. Countless reporters were present and the entire event was broadcast live. Lin Xian's nerves were stretched to the limit. Now it is not just about protecting the elderly. At the same time, we must ensure that the old king does not die. If the old king dies, any interests will become empty talk. Lin Xian looked at the two old men talking and laughing. I was complaining like crazy in my heart. If one day, I become an old cunt, please tell others that I was innocent too. Noon. The old king entertained the old man and Lin Xian. If it were the day before, Lin Xian would not be qualified to serve at all. Because at that time his identity was still a guard. Things are different from now on. Everyone has shown their cards and stopped pretending. Lin Xian sat at the dining table grandly, eating and drinking without caring. From time to time, he glanced at the two old men chatting and laughing, and curled his lips. It feels like these two old guys have a lot of thoughts in their hair. Sudden. Lin Xian raised his hand. Bang, 4 shots per second. A maid who walked in had her limbs broken by bullets. The whole place was silent, and then the maid howled miserably. The guard rushed to the maid, and the old man and the old king looked at Lin Xian. Danger! Lin Xian spoke vaguely and continued to eat. Two old men. 10 minutes later. Poison was found in the soup bowl brought by the maid. It was the same way someone poisoned the old man's teacup. Soon, the person behind the maid was dug out. A princess. Then the princess was treated cruelly and gave up a prince. But neither the princess nor the prince died. Because the old king was merciful. In the afternoon, Lin Xian accompanied the two old men to sit in the garden to enjoy the flowers and watch the show. The assassination happened again. The two people who performed the show were captured by Lin Xian. The old king looked at the two people and was stunned. Because one of them was his childhood playmate. He also gave this playmate everything he wanted. Why did he betray? Then, two more princes were pulled out. The old king's face was no longer smiling. It's nothing for one son to betray. But several sons began to betray one after another. Even the childhood playmate betrayed. Was he abandoned by everyone? Things were completely out of the old king's control. Retribution. Lin Xian looked at the old king. Things like cause and effect are really wonderful. In the field of criminal investigation, cause and effect are also of paramount importance. All policemen know that among the many murders, 70% of the murders are due to love and hatred, counterattack, and revenge. Some people always think that if they do bad things, others can't do anything to them, and they think they won't be punished. But they don't know that some retribution will not only fall on themselves. It will also fall on their relatives. When retribution comes, it will be too late to regret. Night. On the second floor of the palace, a luxurious living room. The old man went to rest. With 15 Dragon Kingdom guards guarding him, Lin Xian was still relieved. What's more, some people's goal is not to run at the old man at all, but to the old king. Lin Xian drank tea leisurely, looking at the old king who was in a daze. Suddenly, the old king asked him a question: if you have the opportunity, do you want to be a king? No. Lin Xian shook his head without hesitation. The old king was surprised. Why? In our dragon kingdom, there is an idiom, lonely and widowed, which is specially tailored for kings. Lin Xian put down the teacup, smiled and said to the old king, do you understand what this idiom means? The old king was slightly stunned and fell into deep thought. It was at this moment the change appeared. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun. Chapter 474. Countless guards rushed to the palace. The royal guards of Defa rebelled. Gunshots rang out on the first floor, and the royal guards fought with the royal guards. Lin Xian was very calm and drank tea. The old king seemed to have figured out what the phrase alone meant. His old face showed emotion and narrowed his eyes. Who said this? How would I know? Lin Xian rolled his eyes. Shouldn't you worry about yourself now? Worry? The old king smiled self-deprecatingly. With you here, who can kill me? Lin Xian narrowed his eyes. I also have a question for you. Please go ahead. The old king smiled at him. Have you ever lived up to your conscience in this life? Lin Xian asked with a smile. This sentence seems to be very stupid and idiotic. But it points directly to the moral court in everyone's heart. A person may be able to deceive anyone, but cannot deceive himself. The old king pondered for a long time and shook his head. Sometimes, I can't sleep at night. Such an honest man, Lin Xian can't do it? For the first time, I think this old man is very interesting. What about you? The old king looked at him. Me? Lin Xian was proud. I slept soundly. Why? The old king was shocked. A monster who killed people like crazy and was covered in blood. How can he sleep well? Because. Lin Xian closed his eyes and concentrated. I have no regrets. After rebirth, he is worthy of his family, his woman, his friends, and his country. Even if he became a slayer of thousands of people, so what? As long as he has no regrets, how can he not sleep? The old king looked at Lin Xian with a changed look. There was shock, confusion, and disbelief. In the end, it turned into a trace of envy and sigh. But soon these emotions turned into calmness, and a strong sense of uneasiness arose in his heart. But the old king didn't know where this uneasiness came from. He really couldn't figure out who the man behind the scenes was. Who else wanted to join forces with the United States to kill him? He had investigated all the suspicious people. He even had spies around those people. Maybe. The old king's pupils shrank slightly. Have you read all the prince information I gave you? Yeah. Lin Xian nodded slightly with his eyes closed. None of them. Huh. The old king was shocked. Why are you so sure? Because I never trust my eyes, I only trust my intuition. Lin Xian raised his hand and pointed to his closed eyes. This thing is very deceptive. The more cases he came into contact with, the more he learned the truth. Things that can be easily discovered by you are all fake, and are what others want you to see. When the old king put the information of the 14 princes in front of him. In fact, there is no need to look at it. Because the person who can peek at the throne will never be so stupid. It is very likely that it is the last thing anyone would expect. Even the old king would ignore the person. A person who is least likely to have problems in people's eyes. Otherwise, how can you deceive a king and play tricks under the nose of a king? Eyes, deceive people. The old king sighed and smiled, like an old man in his twilight years. He has experienced too many life and death in his life. He also knew what Lin Xian meant by the sentence. He knew that the little guy in front of him meant something. I think it's impossible. The old king shook his head confidently. There are only two people. Who? Lin Xian opened his eyes and looked at the old king. A designated crown prince is equivalent to me in this country and has supreme power. The old king said in a light tone, when I die, he will be the king. Who is the other one? Lin Xian continued to ask. Him. A kind and proud smile appeared on the old king's face. My second son, an astronaut. Lin Xian's brain crashed. It's really impossible to equate a prince with an astronaut. He took out his mobile phone and looked at it for a few times. Damn, Lin Xian was surprised. It's really the first astronaut of the rich country. But when Lin Xian saw the other party's personal information, his face turned cold. The University of Denver in Sam's country, an international student? Ha! Don't worry. The old king knew what Lin Xian was thinking and told the story. In order to maintain friendship with Sam's country, I deliberately sent him there, and I would not give him any opportunity to contact certain people in Sam's country, so. Ask you a question. Lin Xian's expression was very serious. Do you think men can have children? The old king was stunned. That expression seemed to say, are you kidding me? In 2008, a man became the first man in the world to get pregnant. Lin Xian said very seriously, and, he gave birth to 3 children in a row. The old king stared with his eyes and mouth open, stunned. Look, men can give birth to children. Lin Xian asked, how can you be sure that your second son will not have any problems? The old king quickly closed his scattered eyes and regained the brilliance of wisdom. The gunfire below stopped. The rebellious guards have been wiped out. The old king waved his hand, and 2 guards left. Go to capture the second son. Now there is only one target. Lin Xian asked with a smile, your crown prince who is about to get all your power. The old king's face suddenly darkened, and his voice was hoarse. What do you mean? He didn't think this child would betray. There was no reason to betray. As long as he died, all his power would belong to this child. Just a moment ago you were still telling me that your second son was fine. Lin Xian sneered, but now you have sent people to catch him. There is a saying in our dragon country that plans are not as fast as changes, and only what you get is yours. Sometimes for a child like you, he can only get real power if you die. While you are alive, no matter how big the promise is, it is meaningless, because the plan may change at any time. Lin Xian looked at the speechless old king. Isn't this the truth? There were not many princes who were abolished in ancient times. The old king was silent. How could he not understand this truth? He just couldn't accept it. But he is a king after all. With a simple wave of his hand, 2 more guards left. Not only that. This time, the old king ordered all his children to be arrested. While keeping them under strict supervision, they were also interrogated in the most severe way. Is it cruel? According to what you said. The old king asked with a smile, the crisis should be resolved now, right? No, it's even more dangerous. Lin Xian looked at the old king and said something that shocked people. Is it possible that you want to kill yourself? Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 475. At this time, the old king looked at Lin Xian as if he were a god. He asked in a tone of doubt, are you kidding? Do you think I'm idle? Lin Xian was also looking at him. Some people want you to die, but you don't have to die. You will just become very obedient and do what they say. The old king frowned. What do you mean? The answer will be revealed soon. Lin Xian picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. If I'm not mistaken, your children will soon gather around their father, and your subordinates and troops will also gather around their king. The old king's expression changed. Confused, incredible, and even incomprehensible. He was clearly sitting here. His children were also imprisoned. How could they come to him? And those subordinates and troops, without his orders. How dare they appear in front of him? Suddenly, the old king's face changed drastically, and he figured out what Lin Xian said. It seemed that he had thought of something terrible. His face gradually turned pale, and he turned his head to look at the 2 guards. Go and see my 2 stand-ins. Stand-in. Many big shots have such people around them. Even the words and deeds of these big shot stand-ins are exactly the same as the original. Because only exactly the same can be called a stand-in, and can deceive everyone. There have even been many stand-ins in history that replace the original. So if a stand-in rises up, is it possible to succeed? Under normal circumstances, it is impossible. But if the stand-in is surrounded by the original's children, subordinates, and troops, they all say that the stand-in is the original. Then this stand-in will become the original. In the past, Mu Qingjian gave Lin Xian a jade seal and taught him a truth. When everyone says that this antique is real, even experts say it is real. Even if it is obviously a fake, it is still real. Many people understand this truth, right? So, something happened. Countless soldiers surrounded the palace. The children of the old king were not imprisoned, but appeared outside the palace. Not only that. Thousands of royal family members were standing outside with the princes and princesses at this time. Standing behind the old king. A brand new, old king. Look, isn't it interesting? Lin Xian, who was standing by the window, was amused when he looked at the scene outside. If there was a mirror now, Lin Xian knew that his expression must be very interesting. It should not be ordinary gloating. He was thinking, is this the most ruthless thing that humans can do? I want to live in Bengbu. Lin Xian grinned and laughed. Will those people succeed? Seriously. Those people outside the palace are dead. Because never underestimate a king. Even if this king is a rubbish, he is still a king. People who can become kings have fancy means, How can ordinary people compare? Retracting his gaze, Lin Xian looked at the gloomy old king, waiting to watch the show. Aren't you worried? The old king asked in a deep voice. Don't let me look down on you. Lin Xian smiled and shook his head. Ha ha. The old king sneered and murmured self-deprecatingly, my children and royal family members, all put together, don't know me as well as an outsider. He just waved his hand. Suddenly, in the dark night, a huge army appeared. Surrounded the royal family members outside the palace, the soldiers and the dignitaries of the rich country. And fighter jets appeared one after another. Following closely, armed helicopters appeared one after another. Then, the national defense system of the rich country was turned on. Countless short-range missile vehicles appeared. At the same time, the gates of the missile silos of some military bases were opened. All the fire control radars have locked onto the military bases of the SAM country stationed in the rich country. The most terrifying thing is, 10 missile vehicles equipped with nuclear warheads drove out of the secret underground garage, appeared on the ground, slowly raising missiles. A usurpation of the throne, from its appearance to its end. It was over in less than an hour. What is turning one's hand to make clouds and turning one's hand to make rain? This is it. Lin Xian looked at the old king in front of him and gave him a thumbs up. Awesome. However, the old king's face was still so gloomy. His inner uneasiness became more and more intense. Because he discovered something terrible. Lin Xian thought of something that he hadn't even thought of. That means there are still many things happening. It is precisely because the old king couldn't figure it out. So things became more and more terrible. What other means will those people use? Suddenly, a Dragon Kingdom guard came to Lin Xian and said something in his ear. The smile on Lin Xian's face froze, and he stood up after a few seconds and nodded to the old king. Then, he walked towards the bedroom where the old man was resting. But he didn't see it. When he turned and left, the old king's face was instantly pale and bloodless. 2 words floated in his mind, Dragon Kingdom. If Dragon Kingdom wants him to die, is there any chance that he can survive? Recalling Lin Xian's horror, the old king's face was ashen, as if he had turned into a sculpture. Sitting motionless on the sofa, like a death row prisoner waiting for the judge to pronounce his sentence. A luxurious bedroom. Lin Xian sat on the sofa and looked at the old man in front of him. Neither of them spoke. But a satellite phone on the coffee table suddenly rang. The old man pointed to the phone and motioned for Lin Xian to answer it. Lin Xian looked serious and picked up the satellite phone to connect. One question. The voice coming from the receiver was low and powerful, with an awe-inspiring majesty. Sam country promised our dragon country to equally share the energy of the rich country. What do you think? Lin Xian. If he traveled through time. At this time, there was an emperor standing in front of him. The emperor asked, I want to choose a prince, what do you think? Lin Xian replied, Your Majesty, I just want to kneel and don't want to talk. Is this something I can get involved in? Let me ask you another question. There was a smile in the voice. In your mind, what kind of country is Sam country? Nation. Lin Xian curled his lips. It's not a group of bandits, robbers, and thieves. How did it become a country? Ha ha. A chuckle rang out, protect the old king. Yes, Lin Xian responded respectfully. Call ended. The fate of a king in a brief conversation. In front of the gate of the palace of hell, I danced once. Is it like a joke? No. Those small countries are like this in the face of superpowers. Just like ancient times. The emperor of the Dragon Kingdom only needs one sentence. A small country will be wiped off the map of the world. When Lin Xian walked up to the old king again, he looked at the old man for 3 seconds and grinned. You owe me your life, Do you understand? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun. Chapter 476. The seemingly calm old king suddenly clenched his hands on the sofa. An abnormal blush appeared on his old face. It seemed that he had regained vitality and vigor from the dead silence. He is worthy of being the ruler of a country, Lin Xian gave his evaluation with the eyes of a theoretical emperor. There is a kind of small tiger in the world, the Sumatran tiger. The largest of these tigers does not exceed 100 kilograms. But no matter how small the tiger is, it is still the king of beasts. Just like the old king in front of him. Sitting back on the sofa, Lin Xian looked at the teacup in front of him. A maid came and brought the teapot respectfully. The old king reached out to take the teapot. Like the maid, he respectfully poured a cup of tea for Lin Xian. Lin Xian accepted it calmly and did not feel it was wrong. Because in this world, there is no greater favor than the grace of life. Don't say that life belongs to others. Why should you control life and death? We are all adults, and we should understand what the law of nature is. From ancient times to now, the strong have always been respected, and there has never been so-called fairness. The fairness in the hearts of many people is only within their own country. That is the gift and fairness given to you by the country's strength. It is the motherland that spoils you. If the country is weak, you go abroad to pretend to be cool? Your head is shaved and you fart. The last madness. After taking a sip of tea, Lin Xian was a little looking forward to it. Not only the United States, but also the person behind the rich country. They are all about to jump out. Now Longguo does not cooperate with the United States to share the wealth. The other party must let the old king die. As long as the old king is alive, he will sooner or later get out of the control of the United States. This is inevitable. Why does the old king want to rely on Longguo? Because the rich don't want to be a dog anymore. Although Longguo controls their life and death. But Longguo will at least give the rich a chance to be a human being, a decent one. One side is to be a dog, and the other side is to be a human being. If it were you, what would you choose? Don't ask why these big countries are bullying Deifu. The truth that holding a treasure is a crime is known to everyone. Yet. The old king nodded and agreed, there should be no bottom line. Revenge is certain, because they want him to die. But. On the surface, the Sam country dare not use force, at most assassination and other means. Because Deifu also has nuclear weapons. This is also the confidence given to them by the Dragon country. But because of a certain contract, Deifu had to cooperate with the Sam country. But now it's different. The contract is about to expire, this is Deifu's opportunity. It is also Deifu's opportunity to change from a dog to a human. Even if it costs everything, it must be done. This is no longer a matter of interests. This is Deifu's future national destiny. Only people at their level will understand the truth. But in front of them, those royal families who are dying in various ways are still jumping around for interests. This is why the old king said that his children, plus a group of royal family members, they are not as thorough as Lin Xian. The old king is envious. Putting aside personal force, just the vision. Any young man who jumps out of Longguo can crush the talents of your country. In his opinion, Longguo doesn't know how many talents like Lin Xian there are. The gap between small countries and big countries is too big. Tomorrow is the last day. Lin Xian took a sip of tea. I can only protect you for one more day, and it depends on you in the future. Understood. The old king sighed and envied, it would be great if you were a member of the royal family. Don't plan to use money, beauty, power. Lin Xian teased, Seduce me. Ha ha. The old king laughed heartily. Don't joke, what are those things? Money is a toy developed by the superiors. Many people think that they have everything if they have money. How naive are you? The superiors only need one word, and the money in your account will be gone. As long as the war starts, the so-called money will become paper. Don't you understand? As for the beauty, the superiors like them only need one word. Thousands of beauties will wash and lie on the bed waiting for their favor. As for power, what is that? You have to make the country strong first, and then the power will be infinitely magnified. This kind of power can go beyond the country and radiate the whole world. Otherwise, the old king in front of him is the master of a country. Is his power great? If it is great, why does he still kowtow in front of Lin Xian? Is it because Lin Xian's military force is strong? Stop it. That's because a word from Longguo can determine the future destiny of Deifu. Only when Longguo gives Deifu a backing, he dares to challenge Sam. The old king kowtows to Lin Xian, and Lin Xian now represents Longguo. This is the real power. Supreme royal power. Suddenly, Lin Xian's face changed. He raised his head instantly and looked outside the palace, and his pupils suddenly shrank. He felt the breath of the soldiers. The terrible thing is that each of these soldiers can threaten him. How is it possible? If there were one or two warriors of the level of Gao Yang and Zhao Guo, he would not be surprised. After all, the world has such a large population, it is not surprising to have a few genius monsters. But if dozens of them suddenly appeared, something would be wrong. Why did the United States of America do that? Lin Xian stood up, his face showing an unprecedented solemnity. A sense of extreme danger surged in his heart. What's wrong? The old king looked at him in surprise. They are a group of superiors who do not show their emotions. What did Lin Xian notice that made his face look so ugly? Something happened. Lin Xian warned in a deep voice, take out your trump card. Whether you can survive tonight depends on your luck. The old king's expression suddenly changed. But without any hesitation, he looked at the guard beside him. The guard quickly took out something like a remote control and pressed it. Followed closely. Lin Xian once again sensed the breath of countless soldiers. From the underground of the palace, there were as many as 200. There is something, Lin Xian looked at the old king. It seems that Deifu is really ready to break with the United States. He actually hid so many soldiers. Maybe many people have misunderstood the real purpose of soldiers. They thought they were sent to the battlefield like training war gods. Have you ever thought about this truth? If these soldiers were thrown into some countries, they turned into a group of assassins. Let them specifically target those high-ranking politicians. What would the result be? This is one of the most terrifying uses of soldiers. They also have a nickname that is not very nice. Death soldiers. Are 200 soldiers enough? Lin Xian's expression kept changing, and he murmured. Then he shook his head. Not enough. Not even 200 soldiers are enough. What kind of people are those soldiers on the other side? Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 477. The night is as thick as ink. It is so deep that it seems to swallow all the light. Under the night, a group of tall, or rather huge, black shadows are advancing rapidly. You can see the black light flashing on their bodies. It is a layer of armor made of metal or some other material. It is very similar to a mechanical exoskeleton, and more like Iron Man's power suit. And these armors are not only not bulky, but agile and flexible. The weapons and equipment on the armor are very advanced, and ordinary people have never seen them. How can there be such a thing in the world? In 1983, a weapons company in the United States began to develop individual exoskeleton armor. Today, decades have passed. Why is there so little information about exoskeleton armor in the world? And those who know about it will also mention that they are bulky, inflexible, and lack power. Is this really the case? Has no one ever thought about what would happen if a set of individual exoskeleton armor was really developed one day? It improves the strength, speed, endurance, reaction, and protection of soldiers. Not only can it guarantee the survival of soldiers, but it can also burst out several times or even dozens of times the combat power. Is there a possibility? This kind of arm technology has been deliberately blocked by someone? In fact, has the military single-soldier exoskeleton been available for a long time? More than 600 meters away from the Defa Palace. The group of black shadows stopped, and two people opened the underground sewage channel. Enter quickly. Walk through an underground drainage channel about 150 meters long. One person came to the wall and stretched out his hand to press on the wall. Slowly opened a door. This is a secret passage leading to the royal palace. Only a few core members of the royal family know about it. 35 people in armor quickly entered the secret passage and sprinted towards the palace. They ran very fast. The 100-meter distance flashed by in no more than 10 seconds. This is a speed that even sprinters cannot reach. And these 35 people in armor did it easily. In a few dozen seconds, they had arrived at the underground of the palace. No one made any sound, like a group of ghosts. However, on the display inside their helmets, they could see through the wall and see countless thermal imaging figures on the ground. One of them took out a palm-sized device and pressed it lightly. In an instant, all lights in the area where the palace was located went out. All electricity was cut off. Only the emergency lighting was turned on and lit up in an instant. But these emergency lights only appeared for a moment. Suddenly, with a bang, there was an explosion inside the palace. But it was not a traditional bomb, but an electromagnetic pulse. Electromagnetic pulse weapons have no strong side effects on the human body. But they have a strong impact on electronic equipment and facilities. They can instantly paralyze any defense system and civilian facilities. Even more terrifying is, in an instant, the entire palace not only fell into darkness again. At the same time, there was a terrible magnetic attraction. It has the ability to attract ferromagnetic materials and is all sucked onto the walls of the palace. For example, the weapons in the hands of countless people have been attached to the wall. They can't be taken down. First, the power was cut off, then the electromagnetic pulse destroyed the facilities, and finally played a trick of magnetic attraction. Basically, all the defense means and weapons inside the palace were paralyzed. Not to mention guns, any metal weapons are finished. All guards have become bare-handed. This is simply a perfect combination of modern weapons and technology. Achieve seamless strikes. For example, no matter how strong the soldiers are, half of their strength comes from the individual. The other half comes from weapons. Without weapons, how much stronger can the soldiers be than ordinary people? Suppose a group of soldiers without weapons face a group of people with weapons. What will be the consequences? Boom! The door of the basement exploded, and a group of demon-like figures rushed out. Tuesday. Gunfire exploded. There is a huge space under the palace, and countless soldiers guarding here. At this time, they are like a group of meat targets. They were ruthlessly harvested by bullets, strangled, shot, and fell. Those are 100 soldiers from a wealthy country. They couldn't even resist. Under the muzzles of 35 guns, they only lasted 4 seconds. All turned into corpses. And this scene in front of them also perfectly explains what it means: falling behind will be beaten. Under the surprise attack of technology and weapons, the soldiers have also become a group of ants. 35 huge black shadows ignored the corpses and ran in the darkness. rushed to the first floor of the palace. When they just rushed to the first floor, suddenly, a group of figures rushed towards them frantically. The weapons in the hands of these people turned into wood, porcelain, and hard objects, none of which were metal. Their speed was so fast that they had already attacked them from the moment those huge black shadows appeared. But all their attacks, all their weapons, when they hit and stabbed these demon-like figures, they were invalid. They had no effect at all. What's more terrifying is that even the surface of the defensive armor on these people can't be broken. If someone who knows the business sees this scene, he will immediately find out that the armor on these people is not metal at all. It is graphene material. This material also has a nice name, black gold. Professionals have found that the defense of this material is very terrible. It is 3-7 times higher than the so-called Kevlar fiber. Kevlar fiber is also the main material of modern bulletproof vests. Now, someone wears a set of exoskeleton armor made of graphene material. What are you going to use to break their defense? Don't say there are no weapons. Even if you are given weapons, can the bullets penetrate their exoskeleton armor? Bang, bang, bang. Gunfire roared. 35 huge black shadows turned into butchers. Countless soldiers and guards of the rich countries turned into corpses under special bullets. Died in helplessness and despair. What's more desperate is, these 35 people are not just wearing exoskeleton armor, they are also 35 soldiers. Top soldiers. This is why Lin Xian can sense the terrible threat. Can threaten his life. And he also noticed that even if it was Deifu's 200 soldiers, it was meaningless to not be able to stop these people. Just tell me. In an environment without weapons, only using hand-to-hand combat, how to kill these 35 soldiers wearing exoskeleton armor? There is no solution. The second floor hall was pitch black. It seemed that an inexplicable fear was quietly spreading in the air. The bottomless darkness was like a huge black hole, swallowing everything. Lin Xian sat quietly in the darkness, squinting his eyes. He exuded a strong, cold murderous aura. Is this your final madness? If so, it seems that it is still not enough. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun. Chapter 478. The second floor of the palace. When 35 soldiers wearing exoskeleton armor rushed in, there were no guards in the entire second floor hall. No one attacked them. There was only a gloomy silence and darkness. Every inch of air was filled with depression and uneasiness. It seemed that an unknown existence was peeping at them in the darkness. Suddenly, the two soldiers looked at the sofa suddenly, and their backs felt cold. There was a person sitting there. Like an immortal sculpture, sitting on a gorgeous throne. Quiet and majestic, looking at them with contempt. Like a real king, overlooking the ants under his feet. Be careful! A soldier shouted instantly, warning his companions behind him. Too late. The figure on the throne disappeared in the darkness. No, not disappearing. It was Lin Xian who was too fast. Just a ricochet, his body appeared in the air like teleportation. Bang! Lin Xian stood in front of two soldiers wearing exoskeleton armor. Two fists hit their chests. It was an indescribable terrifying force. The two soldiers felt as if the paw of a polar bear hit them. Even though the defense of the exoskeleton armor reduced most of the force and impact, two huge bodies flew into the air and hit their companions behind them. Lin Xian was surprised. With his current strength, he could easily break human bones and penetrate human bodies. His fist was actually blocked. What kind of armor is this? Assault, gunshots, and explosions came. Countless special bullets were ejected from the muzzles of more than a dozen special submachine guns, tearing the air, with a sharp whistling sound, blocking all Lin Xian's evasive space. After all, they are soldiers, and top soldiers, and the strength of these people is equally terrifying. But Lin Xian is no longer the Lin Xian of the past. Now he can see the trajectory of the bullets clearly. He can also sense danger in advance and predict the trajectory. Countless bullets splashed against his body. His speed made it impossible to catch his figure. He has already stood in front of another soldier. Bang! Another kick hit the opponent's lower body. That terrifying force was enough to make anyone lose everything, but it only kicked the opponent away, not killed him. This defense is a bit fierce. Lin Xian's heart sank suddenly. Don't talk about the armor that others have developed specifically for him. This kind of armor can't be developed in a short time. It means that the United States has already had it. If this kind of exoskeleton armor can be widely popularized in the United States Army, it would be terrible. But thinking of the future era when drones and mechanical dogs are flying all over the sky and crawling all over the ground, this thing seems to be useless and can only play a role in special scenarios. Lin Xian was relieved. Then, he discovered other characteristics of these exoskeleton armors. The speed of these soldiers is too fast, which has exceeded the limit of ordinary people. Strength, speed, endurance, reaction, comprehensive enhancement. When the top soldiers wear it, they can at least burst out several times the combat power. No wonder everyone can threaten him. Lin Xian finally found the key. But how to kill them if you can't break their defense? He. Who said that you can't kill someone without a gun head? In an instant, Lin Xian's figure passed through these soldiers. Bullets flew, and the soldiers were not afraid of being injured with exoskeleton armor. But the problem is that they can also help Lin Xian block bullets. And Lin Xian finally found the weakness of the exoskeleton armor. Bang, a punch. The terrifying force hit the chin of a soldier. Crack. The soldier's head twisted strangely and broke. Their weakness is the joints of the exoskeleton armor. In order to make the exoskeleton armor flexible, all joints must be compatible with human activities. The neck and limbs must be able to rotate flexibly. Right? But if you are flexible, your defense will be weak. The neck and limbs can be broken. Is that right? So, no matter how strong the defense of these exoskeleton armor is, what's the use for the cheaters? The remaining 34 soldiers were stunned for a moment. One of their companions died. How is it possible? Their exoskeleton armor can even defend against light rockets, just like a safe house on their bodies. How could they be killed by bare hands? After all, they are all top-level soldiers with high IQs. They figured out the weakness of the exoskeleton armor in an instant. Their eyes were filled with fear and anxiety, and cold sweat dripped down their foreheads. They burst out with even more terrifying fighting power, wanting to kill Lin Xian on the spot. It was useless. If it was a long-range attack, Lin Xian might still be worried about his safety. Speaking of close combat, this is his domain. Lin Xian walked through the rain of bullets and appeared next to a soldier. Crack, countless bone fractures merged into one. The limbs and necks of the soldiers were broken by fist shadows. 2 seconds. Nearly 20 soldiers were lying down. Next, Lin Xian did something that made all the soldiers confused. A moment. He jumped high, not fast. The body flipped in the air and stepped on the ceiling. Opportunity, the remaining soldiers were all attracted by Lin Xian's figure. Countless guns were pointed at him. Even a fool would know. If a person is in the air and has no leverage point, he can only wait for death. Is Lin Xian courting death? Of course not. Instead, he was deliberately attracting the thoughts, sights, and movements of all the soldiers. He was also maliciously seducing. When all the soldiers looked up, they saw 2 guns. 2 exaggeratedly huge pistols were held in Lin Xian's hands. Why are his pistols still there and not sucked away by the high magnet? Because the people who made these two guns also used special materials to reduce the weight of the gun body. Otherwise, when you are holding a steel pistol weighing more than 3 kilograms, can you still use it flexibly to shoot? Bang! 14 shots in 1 second. 14 terrifying bullets were ejected. The heads of 14 soldiers exploded instantly. Forget about graphene defense. Under the attack of 14 powerful, ultra-long-range special bullets. It's like being hit by a sniper bullet at close range. What defense can stop it? You can even shoot through the armored vehicles. When Lin Xian fell to the ground, 14 bodies fell. No. It was 35 top-level soldiers, all of whom were killed. Lin Xian slowly changed the magazine. What other cards do you have? Suddenly, Lin Xian was stunned. He remembered something. Why would the royal palace have super magnets? How was the electromagnetic pulse bomb installed? Why did these soldiers know the royal secret passage? Countless questions emerged in Lin Xian's mind and turned into a sneer. He finally knew who the person no one could have thought of was. Because no one thought that this person would always stand by the old king. Even if the old king died, this person would never become the new king. He was also the person who was least likely to betray the old king. Because that was a person who had shared life and death for decades. The person next to him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 479. The top floor of the palace. There is a huge jade throne. At this time, the old king and the old princess are sitting on the throne. The walls around are inlaid with gems and pearls, shining with charming light. Endless luxury seems to decorate the entire attic into a dreamland. Through the exquisite window lattice, the old king looked at the morning light in the sky. It seems that he is thinking about something, and it seems that he is recalling something. The old princess sat aside. Even though she is over 70 years old this year, she still arranges traditional drinks and snacks for the old king like a maiden. The traces of time have carved deep wrinkles on her face. Although her eyes are no longer as bright as before, they still reveal a deep wisdom and kind light. Looking at the old king quietly, with a gentle smile on her face. Why is it you? The old king came back to his senses, his eyes were like a deep lake. It seems that he can penetrate people's hearts and see through all the troubles and glitz. In the rich country, even the princess is still a man's appendage. Just a woman, even a tool. He gave her everything she wanted, and gave her a lifetime of glory. Except for not giving her power, he basically gave her everything. Even their child is about to become the crown prince. In a few years, he will become the new king. So the old king couldn't figure it out. Why? Because this is the royal family. The old princess's tone was calm and gentle, making people feel a kind of maternal warmth. No one can guarantee that everyone will not change, but I only have one child, and I am a mother. I'm dying, you're dying, and we don't know what will happen in the future. But, I want to protect my child and do my best to protect him. You and I know how cruel the royal family is. Only when we are sure that he can be safe. The old princess's tone always remained calm and calm. I can leave with peace of mind. There was no change on the old king's face. It seemed that everything in the world had become light in his eyes. But after listening to the old princess' words, he slowly closed his eyes. Sighed. Was she really wrong? If she was not wrong, then who was wrong? Figures appeared around. They were 10 soldiers, fully armed soldiers. Their guns were all pointed at the old king. After a while, the old king slowly opened his eyes, without even looking at the soldiers, but calmly asked the old princess, "Does our child know?" How could he know? The old princess smiled gently and poured a cup of milk tea for the old king. Only if you don't know anything can you live happily and be a good king. What did the Sam kingdom promise? The old king's voice was slightly hoarse, with a hint of disdain and contempt. As long as our children are obedient, they will have wealth and power for a lifetime. The corners of the old princess' mouth rose slightly, outlining a happy arc. This is what I want most. Or, this is what a mother wants most. You can say that she has long hair and short knowledge. You can also say that she doesn't understand power. You can also say that she doesn't understand national destiny. But for a mother, as long as the child is safe, she can give everything for it. Because of this, the old king couldn't even raise the intention to kill her. His expression changed, so self-deprecating. Should he say that he chose the right good woman, or the wrong stupid woman? You, really want to kill me? The old king smiled and held her hand. The old princess's hunched body trembled suddenly. A pair of old eyes, splashes of water appeared. Tears fell like rain. Ha ha. The old king laughed happily. He picked up the teacup without any hesitation and drank the milk tea in it. The old princess' tears flowed faster, and she also picked up the teacup in front of her. Drink the milk tea. Her other hand, tightly held the old king's hand. Aren't you going to come out and say goodbye to me? The old king held the princess's hand and looked not far away. A door slowly opened, and an old man walked in. His hair is like silver frost in winter, white and soft. It adds some traces of time to his face, recording the ups and downs he has experienced. The old man has a warm smile on his lips, and his steps are still steady. He is the deputy director of the CIA of Sam Country. David Cohen. Old friend, are you still not giving up? David stood in front of the old king and said with a smile, are you waiting for the monster from Dragon Country? No need to wait, 35 soldiers are going to find him. Even if he is a monster, it is useless, because he also has to face 35 monsters. David's mouth outlined a trace of sarcasm. Dead. This is the decapitation plan he planned. Not only to kill the old king. Even the monster from Dragon Country will be killed together. From now on, he will control the entire royal family of the rich country and become a real king. Not for Sam Country? Yes and no. There is a saying in Dragon Country, if a man does not work for himself, he will be punished by heaven and earth. Ha ha. The old king sneered lightly, his eyes calm as a mirror and sharp as a knife. A murderous intent that condensed countless years of life and death, strategy and wisdom, and was soaring to the sky. It emanated from the old king. And his body seemed to become tall and mighty at this moment. Although he was sitting on a chair, he seemed to be looking down at David in front of him. David's expression suddenly changed, and he looked at the old man in front of him in astonishment. Why hasn't he died yet? Not only was his face stunned, but even the old princess beside him was also stunned, looking at the teacup. As a pillow person, there is no man in the world who knows her better than her. Suddenly, a surprise flashed in her eyes, but in an instant, it turned into endless fear. But in the end, it turned into calmness, still holding her man's hand, not wanting to let go. On the other hand, David felt a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. The air became suffocatingly silent and quiet. The two old men looked at each other silently. Until the old king said lightly, let's make a bet. David looked at the old king with some surprise. Bet? Yes. The old king said calmly, let's make a bet and see which of the 35 monsters you mentioned and the sword of the Dragon Kingdom will appear in front of me first. Let's also see the future destiny of this country. Ha ha. David laughed, but his smile was so sarcastic. Why are you so confident in him? Because. In the old king's slightly turbid eyes, a hint of pride and smile appeared. In the eyes of the king, you are just an ant. David was stunned. It was also the moment he was stunned. Bang, 10 shots in 1 second. 10 soldiers fell to the ground. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun. Chapter 480. Lin Xian walked towards the old king. He walked behind the white-haired deputy director of Sam Country. He reached out and pulled the other person aside. Are you blind? Lin Xian said calmly, you're blocking my way. David. Old king. The old princess covered her mouth and chuckled. Lin Xian looked at the old king and then at the old princess. The old princess stood up slowly and bowed. This is the rule and etiquette of a wealthy country. Can't you do it? Lin Xian looked at the old king again and joked. If it were you, would you be able to do it? The old king asked seriously. In Lin Xian's mind, the figures of the Mu family sisters appeared. He sighed happily, fortunately, I was not born into an emperor's family. The old king also sighed, yes, you are so lucky. I'm leaving now. The old princess finally let go of the old king's hand. He took one last look at his man. Turn around and leave. Lin Xian and the old king looked at her back with complicated eyes. Won't you stop it? Lin Xian asked until the old princess's back disappeared. The old king closed his eyes to block the pain in his eyes. I am the king. The most ruthless emperor's family, Lin Xian sighed. This kind of ruthlessness does not mean that the old king wants to be ruthless. But to sit in that seat, you must be ruthless. Let's use a simple metaphor. Suppose a machine has feelings. What will be the result? There will only be one result, destruction. But these have nothing to do with Lin Xian. Turning around, he looked at the deputy director of the CIA. David's expression had long become distorted and pale, his eyes were empty and confused, revealing deep fear. He was muttering, how could this happen? Why did he appear? This is impossible. Why didn't he die? Why? Every character in those words was full of panic and despair. At this moment, David was like an old tree that had gone through many hardships. He no longer had the courage and temperament of being a high-ranking deputy director of the CIA, and he no longer had the calmness. Why don't you save yourself some dignity? Lin Xian said calmly, look at how you look now, you look like a trembling old dog. He didn't insult. Because that's really what David was like at this time. Where there is still the appearance of a superior, he has turned into a bereaved dog. Facing such an old dog is like wrestling with a pig. Winning is not honorable, losing is even more embarrassing. How disgusting. Why did I lose? I've obviously calculated everything. Why? David's expression became desperate and ferocious, as if his facial features were distorted by an invisible force. His eyes were wide open, with madness flashing in his pupils, staring at Lin Xian. Why? Lin Xian sneered, you are not as good as me in terms of strategy, you are not as good as me in terms of means, and you are still not as good as me in terms of fighting ability. What are you going to fight me with? Murder and heart-wrenching. David was stunned, and the madness and ferocity on his face disappeared. The body shook a few times. Poof, sitting on the ground. It seems that he has lost his soul and turned into a stupid puppet. Lin Xian withdrew his gaze, worried that it would stain his eyes. 2 personal guards came, picked up the old dog and left. What are you going to do next? Lin Xian looked at the old king and asked with a smile. Ever played with missiles? The old king also looked at him and asked with a smile. This. Lin Xian shook his head, not really. I invite you, the old king smiled. Is it okay to ask for something like releasing a missile? Lin Xian felt his heartbeat speed up and his blood boil. I can barely control my expression. Because I haven't been this excited for a long time. A laptop was placed in front of Lin Xian. At the same time, A red button was also placed in front of him. The old king sat aside and looked at Lin Xian with a smile. He wanted to see how cruel this Dragon Kingdom sword was. Dare. But how could he know how reckless the young man in front of him was? If Lin Xian was really reckless, even he would be scared. Under the gaze of the old king with a dull smile, Lin Xian's finger has already pressed on the red button. A moment. Countless missiles flew towards the SAM military base in Daifu. Someone will ask. Can the missile defense system protect against close-range missile strikes? The answer is. Are you thinking about shit? What's more, the old king did something even more extreme and turned off all the power in SAM's military base. It takes 25 seconds for a military base to activate full backup power. What is enough for 25 seconds? There are 5 military bases and more than 3,000 SAM soldiers. Swallowed up by the terrifying missile explosion, it was reduced to nothing. Is the old king crazy? No, he's normal. You're here to kill me. What, do I still have to endure it? When the emperor is angry, rivers of blood flow, it is never a joke. Do you think the old king's revenge is over? Not at all. He ordered David, the deputy director of the CIA of Sam State, to be hanged outside the palace. At the same time, they also hung the corpses of Sam's soldiers outside the palace. Whip the corpse. The most amazing thing is that the confession given by David was played on the big screen. In front of the whole world, slap Sam in the face. Sam's country can't even fight back. There is no other way, you sent someone to assassinate the king. Even if they don't have a bottom line, they are doing it behind the scenes. Now everyone in the world knows that you want to assassinate the rich old king. You ignored it? And this day, the old king and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dragon Kingdom carried the tripod in front of the whole world. Various contracts were signed. At the same time, the old king personally sent the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dragon Kingdom to carry the tripod and went to the airport. Use his special plane to see off the people of Longguo. Just before leaving, the old king held the hand of a handsome young man during the live broadcast. Thanks. The old king had complicated eyes and expressed his sincere gratitude. You're welcome. Lin Xian smiled and nodded. Come and sit down in Longguo when you have time, and I'll treat you to a drink. Must. The old king laughed heartily. Goodbye. Lin Xian walked towards the plane. When he was about to board the plane, he suddenly noticed a car not far away. There was a woman sitting in the car. She was also smiling and waving at him. Old princess. Lin Xian's expression was stunned, even dumbfounded. Ha 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 ha. The old king's hearty laughter burst out. Satisfied? You can see the Dragon Kingdom sword showing this expression. Really satisfied? Naughty. Lin Xian looked at the old king dumbfounded and held out his thumb. You are so awesome, I lost. And his mood became better than ever at this moment. The most ruthless emperor's family? No, he had an old friend. That was a different king. Perhaps, the future of Longguo and Daifu will be different. Lin Xian got on the plane. Come gently, just as I walk quietly. Goodbye, no goodbye.